My title is Between the Digital and the Distanced Lives a Feeling, and although this text has changed shape, it still leads with feeling as my compass. All of the things I will discuss either need feeling from all of you or have feeling already, and I carry it around with me. Getting to know my computational personality, feeding my electronic body. It exists without feeling, without pain, grief or humour. It will survive a lot longer than I will. Its inky hypocritical fingers leave traces like a human hand, but without feeling. It generates matter, but does not make it. It thrives without sensitivity, concern or awareness of any other body. You could argue it lacks sensitivity, but is overly sensitive. Backspace, loading horizons that stall and crackle, a sensory overload. But it is autonomous, it doesn't need me, it doesn't need to feel me. It could last forever without a single human interaction. It is oblivious to my judgment, my energy, my existence. I hold the on button, crumbs between the letter R and T, like reminiscent traces of a non-human interaction from a previous encounter. My skin holds on to these interactions, refusing to let them go. I have no choice but to wash them off whilst repeating the mantra, save the NHS. I'm depriving my skin of material correspondence and withdrawing the ability to contact other bodies. Every part of me feels it. My skin feels the loss. I envy the machine. Connecting to it removes the present loss I feel within my life. We are co-creating alternative futures. I upload myself, my eyes present, my moving mouth and my megapixel skin. I see other bodies but not like I know them. Flickering, stuttering, fading, I'm becoming gradually other. I'm a shapeshifter, an operation that exists in codes and numbers, a reshaped version of myself. It is both me and not me, a symbiotic kin, a mode of being, an alternate reality, an experimental embodiment of the unknown, a shifting between the actual and the virtual. It's impossible to insert my gaze deep enough to penetrate the surface. I exist somewhere in the machine, but I don't know where. I'm both here and there, existing in multiple borders, looking into the unknown, surrounding myself in it, fighting and absorbing it. It knows a lot more than I do. Its affection remains invisible. It does not smile or sigh when I search for something. It can produce the unexpected and it can learn, just like I can. We have that in common. It does not like or dislike things, but I do know that it is manipulative. It censors my next move, correcting my words, perhaps you mean this, promoting cyclical and predictable advertisements and weaving in algorithmic concerns into my future. Maybe if I wasn't so dependent on a machine, I would think it was useful, intuitive, insightful. I feel the strain between my existence splitting itself, both machine and matter. In our inhabited hybrid techno-ecologies, we must search, strive and create a new mode of being, to thrive in the organic and the artificial, the unaffected and the synthetic. From here, we cannot endorse just one. From imagination to interface, I found my judgment clouded, actions limited, even though the machine is unlimited. I found the corners of the screen and beyond. In a time of unprecedented redundancy, the lack of awareness has both socially and experientially halted our progress as a species. The removal of the self from the situational, physical, emotional narratives has left devastation and grief as a global experience. From here, we must be present. Like the machine, we must respond to the results our world is producing. That response must collectively engage between here and there. Don't be afraid of it. I'm an artist that is fascinated with the diagram. Its agency and potential often mean I'm a collaborator in a network of human and non-human forces. I would like to utilise my reflections on the diagram to further resolve my thoughts, the best way I know how. The diagram is a tool for solution and possibility. It signifies an opportunity and will introduce the future while simultaneously preserving and learning from the past. The diagram acts like a technology. It shifts between the actual and the virtual, intuitive and reasoned, and holds the past, promises the future, and grounds you within the present. It is both at your fingertips and beyond physical touch. You are in and out of control. The diagram thrives within these tensions of knowns and unknowns. It highlights an active, sensitive experience we must learn from together. We must define the space we inhabit with purpose and meaning, but we must do so by being the most responsive, sympathetic bodies possible. Knowing and unknowing matters. Acknowledging that we are complicit in a web of process, action, and results. Our mundane thoughtlessness matters. We must think and create from sensitivity. Being one or the other is not enough. We must either be both or learn how to touch both sides, or even map out the edges. My heightened experience of survival over the last few months has highlighted one thing. Being needs to matter. Being in a space, being with someone, being with material. Other people being should matter. Being must go beyond sitting here with you. You can sit in this room, our four walls, my square window, a crummy keyboard, but your being doesn't stop here. Your imagination cannot be uploaded to an interface. It cannot be confined by a rectangle. Your imagination sits above you, all around you. It binds things together. I don't see it like air, I see it as something more fluid. There's a part of that fluidity that cannot get between the screen. It isn't pushed through each key on the keyboard and doesn't flow through the wires. So, being comfortable with the past, being secure in the present, being active and being slow, being ordinary and being powerful. Create consequences and amplify the feeling of being. To have space, to be around a body, to be creative. Do not forget these simple conditions. We have all experienced the withdrawal of these things. I previously stated that we must inhabit and explore the in-between, not to target and strive for balance, but to comfortably exist within the tensions. These tensions are here to be playful, insightful, and imaginative. I encourage you to find your body within these tensions and allow others to do the same. To have space. My skin is calling out to you, each one of you, asking for the space to cease being dormant. I do not have answers. I do have a feeling though. The removal of our bodies, our emotional and mental withdrawal from social and political issues, or from a physical space has mattered. It needs to matter urgently. I no longer see, feel, hear my consequences. Log on, log off. We can think, dance, create, listen to the consequences that we've provoked. Although our bodies are divided, pixelated, warped and glitching, I've missed our feeling. The feeling of being with the body, but the feeling of feeling. The machine is emotionless. It does not care that you are aching, crying or laughing. This reflection took the longest time, and it wasn't until I received feeling in tangible form on a surface through the rectangle in my door. I had become so mechanical, so passive, so dormant, I lost feeling. Yes, I could cry and laugh. In fact, I tell you, I did that most days. This was deeper. The feeling was stronger, more liquid, more inside me than I knew possible. I opened this narrative of feeling from two artists. I found a vulnerability that ceased to exist before. They made cuts and knots, paths and consequences. They fastened futures and they called for change. They actioned their feeling. They listened to feeling. They had gone between the tensions, now and what is yet to come. It was a scary process being vulnerable with other artists, especially on a surface which feels competitive, collaborative and connected. It wasn't about our autonomy or our collaboration, it was about tensions. It was about support and understanding that feeling tensions matters. This conversation goes beyond the physical. It goes beyond rules. There are two tutors who help me reflect on this next point, unconsciously so. One artist possesses the power to sympathise with error, more than just acknowledging or responding to it creatively. It becomes an action for unlearning, for process, for agency, for collaborative understanding and exploring. To be affected by both certainty and uncertainty, and listen to the tensions between the folds. The other artist radiates rebellion. The lines are there to be drawn over, a feeling so deep that needs to be shaped, mapped out, actioned, to create using feeling as a compass. I would argue I found my deep feeling through witnessing their feeling in action. These two artists helped me understand, activate and produce results that weren't for a box or a number, but were for an innate fascination and drive for making, doing and listening. To be around bodies. These effects or reflections wouldn't have been possible without witnessing action, or the process of action. To be around a body. Virtually, I'm not around you. To an extent, your rectangular mechanical body is next to me, above me, surrounding me, but I'm barely even myself. I'm a secondary form of myself that lacks the things we need to create with. To be around a body does not translate on a virtual space in the same way. I used the simple example of a sketchbook as a form of vulnerability. At times, the institutional structure can lack vulnerability or feeling. The bodies that populate the space need to share feeling in order to move with feeling. Being will extend and multiply if we understand mutually, collectively, that being matters. If feeling is removed, then we are back to the beginning of this discussion. To be creative. Creative liberation goes beyond dialogue. Within every artist, there is a charged, violent, subtle, loud, vibrating need to make, do, and think. I strongly believe this feeling is available for everyone. We create a language that is untouchable with words, we project colour and light with our eyes, and we listen to the material song that spills through the cracks of silence. We need to listen more, to ourselves, to each other. The artist in the data-induced panel next to you is listening to a different material song. We need to listen more. Humanity is singing a tormented song. We need to listen more. Your being is embossed with a fight that only you possess, a fight that strives for change, for action, for feeling. Use it. We need to listen more. Over the last few months, the pandemic has meant that I've had the opportunity to listen more. I've listened to different feelings and voices that would have otherwise been silenced or overlooked. I would like to use this platform to talk about what change means for me right now, beyond our four walls. I wrote this text just before I graduated a few weeks ago. There's something about finding balance in a pandemic which has been delicately destructive. The removal of any and all solid foundations has meant that the need to reset has mattered. That reset spans over terrains and lives as a feeling in the pit of your stomach. The feeling now travels with me everywhere. In my local food shop, in my short walk across the park, in my workplace. The feeling has lived with one of you during this time too. However, during our pandemic, we have had the opportunity to address our present bias in our society, riddled with hate, ignorance, and prejudice. The brutal and unjust killing of George Floyd highlighted a need to reset. The feeling is a product of finally seeing, listening, and reacting to centuries of heartbreak, inexcusable killing and silencing of voices that deserve to be heard. Here's how I'm listening to my feeling. I'm addressing and using my privilege for positive change. I'm listening to others, including people of colour. I'm listening as a sympathetic body, absorbing the feeling from one to another. I mentioned that this feeling also follows me to my workplace. I work for one of the top fast fashion companies globally. Here's why being the most responsive, sympathetic bodies needs to matter. The clothes I sell each day were made by a body of colour. They are not paid a living wage. The same bodies that touch this fabric that I pass over the counter, they went on strike in Bangladesh, unpaid, overworked, unheard. The cloth that is silent connects us both. We need to listen more. This material that is passively consumed is no different to the sketchbook I mentioned earlier. One artist was stitched through the pages, and I would trace it with my fingertips, almost accessing her story but not quite. The stitching on narratives across clothing made by an unnamed, unheard garment worker should hold the texture and meaning of honesty. These stitches leave lines like maps. These lines host stories internationally. We should care what stories go on our bodies. It was made by someone with feeling. Maybe listening to the material song means listening to the material story deeper. What story is your body telling? What are your clothes saying? In that same cloth holds responsibility of climate corruption. These garments add to global greenhouse gas emissions that equal more than the aviation industry. We consume 6 to 7 times more since 1980, but the lifespan of our clothes is just half. We opened our clothes shop during the pandemic. I stand unchallenged, privileged, glazing over at the passive unseeing of consumer culture, whilst one customer wakes me up by saying, "It feels like we're back in normality." This message of normality is one that makes my skin itch. Normality was our inability to listen, so to strive for change across terrains, we cannot address normality without outlining what was going wrong. If we harness the necessary ethical conviction and persistence to listen, change and act in our limited and large ways, we have an opportunity. It all starts with being vulnerable. We need to connect the experience of COVID-19 to the impact of change. If we find the tensions, we can move between them, abstract them, connect them, build from them. We might be able to overcome our present bias and map change for civilization that is meaningful and sensitive. The only way I had these realizations was by stepping aside from myself and letting other things come through. These last few months have meant the most emotionally exhausting, online and offline. In Yemen, 80% of the population are in need of humanitarian assistance. Men in suits have made decisions about transgender rights that were never theirs to make. Some of the most vulnerable in our country have been extinguished due to the lack of resources and national funding. Being needs to matter. There's a stillness that needs to be held onto in this moment. A stillness that allows for listening, between bodies, threaded through us, and a vulnerability that unites us. I'm going to finish on a few lines that have been said but need repeating. In a time of unprecedented redundancy, the lack of awareness has both socially and experientially halted our progress as a species. The removal of the self from the situational, physical, emotional narratives has left devastation and grief as a global experience. From here, we must be present. Like the machine, we must respond to the results our world is producing. That response must collectively engage between here and there. Don't be afraid of it. I previously stated that the diagram is a tool for solution and possibility. I'm now going to change the word diagram to being. Being is a tool for solution and possibility. It signifies an opportunity and will introduce the future while simultaneously preserving and learning from the past. Being acts like a technology. It shifts between the actual and the virtual, intuitive and reasoned. It is both at your fingertips and is beyond physical touch. You are in and out of control. Being thrives within these tensions of knowns and unknowns. It highlights an active, sensitive experience we must learn from together. We must define the space we inhabit with purpose and meaning, but we must do so by being the most responsive, sympathetic bodies possible. Thank you.